All right. Hello, everybody. So, in this video, what I really want to continue talking about is writing process, how we get to that final polished draft. So, the first thing is that I'm a firm believer that clear ideas lead to clear writing. And this isn't just with writing, this is with speaking too. Maybe you've had the experience in the past of talking to somebody and you're not really sure what you want to say, and then you start talking and you think, oh, they no, that's not right, let me go back, let me rephrase that. Or maybe you're telling a joke and you realize you got the order wrong. It's because you didn't have that idea clearly established in your mind. So we're going to dive a little bit more into the elements of the writing process. So in the previous video, I kind of did a broad overview and talked about the importance of having a process that works for you, that kind of fits into those major chunks, the pre-writing, drafting, and revising. And I do think that one of the errors that happens is that people just kind of do it all at once simultaneously. They're pre-writing, they're writing, and they're revising. And especially in a business environment, that is not a great idea, because your ideas will not be clear and it's not going to lead to clear writing. Now, I understand that sometimes there is a time crunch, but even emails that I've needed to send really quickly, I usually have enough time to do some sort of basic drafting, do some revising, and then do some polishing. And again, it depends on how much time you have and what your overall goal is. So let's talk a little bit more about pre-writing. And I like this meme because it's a sort of people who think, I don't need an outline for a speech. That's just training wheels. And the same would be true for writing an email or an essay. I don't need a pre-writing phase. I can just jump into it. I can wing it and do it. And I'll be honest, there are some people who do that well and it works well for them. But that's not everybody. I don't think it's the majority. So this, again, kind of goes back to my writing process. I think because I've been writing for so long and because of the education that I've had in writing, a lot of this is sort of dovetails, right? But a good place to start with the pre-writing phase, again, suggestion, not prescription, is to think of the 5 W's and an H, right? Who are you writing for? Who's involved? And again, if we're talking about an email, we're thinking about who's our primary audience and who else might be CC'd or included on that email. What is happening? What is the purpose of the email? Why is it happening? What led to the individual steps that got us to this point? Where is it happening? Now, again, it may not be that there's a specific where. So if there is maybe a no where that this is happening, then you don't necessarily need to include it. When is it happening, or when does it need to happen? Now, I think especially in business correspondence, this is likely going to be part of the process. We're either saying this thing happened in the past, this thing happened last week, and now we need to do this. Or perhaps we're saying, here is the rollout plan for our product. So here is a timeline of when things need to happen. And then how is it going to happen, or how can we respond? So again, within a business context, that might be, I need this person to accomplish this task. I need this person to accomplish this task, so on and so forth. But that does need to be clear and explicit. Now, a couple sort of thoughts as we kind of go backwards. And in the previous video, I talked about pre-writing quite a bit, but you could use an outline. And if that works with your brain, great. That is basically a step-by-step structure that can be expanded later. A good way to think about an outline is like the table of contents in a book. You're not telling everything, you're just hitting the highlights. Shitty first drafts or rough drafts or throwaway drafts are kind of like a free writing exercise where you're just writing things down and you're really trying to figure out what you're thinking. Again, for my brain, that works really well because I find that a lot of the time I need to talk through things or write through things so that I can understand them, and then I can formulate from there. If you're a more visual person, then maybe a mind map might help. But whichever one of these you choose, and of course, this is not exhaustive, make sure it works best for you and for the task at hand. So again, a mind map is like this thing in the bottom left-hand corner. And what you would do is in the center bubble, you're writing your main concept, and then you're branching out from there and you're starting to connect all sorts of different ideas. It can be a great tool to use if you're visual, if you're really in the starting stages, to kind of get the ideas down. In the center sort of top here is, I found this online, so this isn't my handwriting by any means, a sort of rough draft or shitty first draft. You can see that things are scribbled out. There are arrows pointing to other places. There are notes and there are numbers and things like that. And then there's an outline, which is a sort of very detailed, again, like the table of contents of a book. I will be honest, I think I might have mentioned this before, but I will use these different strategies sometimes together. Sometimes I'll do a rough draft, a shitty first draft, and then from that create a mind map. Sometimes in my professional capacity, it is best to make an outline, just maybe for a presentation or a report to my boss or something like that. I want to make sure that I've got all those bullet points down. So that can be helpful too. Okay, so then let's talk about drafting. So if the pre-writing phase is entirely about getting all your ideas and figuring things out, then the next step is drafting. Now, I will say one thing real quickly, because it just occurred to me, is that a lot of the time when I'm doing a shitty first draft or something like that, I might leave a space. If I'm typing, I'll put it in brackets, or if I'm writing, I'll put it in a box, and I'll just leave myself a note, need quote here, or need data here. That way, I'm not breaking up that thinking process by getting bogged down in details. I'm still getting kind of all my ideas together because I know I can go and find those other things. Okay, so let's talk about drafting. And this is a longer process. I'd say, depending on what you're doing, drafting is probably going to take up the bulk of your time. Depending on how important the piece of writing is, you might have 2, 3, 4, 5 drafts of something. My rule as a writer, when I was writing short stories, I still do, but I haven't for a little while, is that I would do a minimum of 11 drafts. That's a lot. When I was working in more of a journalistic capacity, my rule was 4 drafts at a minimum, and it depended. That forced me to go back and revise things. Now, do you have to do 4, 5, 11 drafts of an email? Probably not. At that point, you're probably overthinking it. But it is a good reminder to slow down. So let's talk about moving from that pre-writing to that drafting phase. So what I would suggest, once you have all your pre-writing, you feel like you've really got that clear thinking, all the components are there, you can go back, you can review your outline, your mind map, your shitty first draft, and start to think about what is important. Did you leave any information out? Is there any information that's not necessary? And again, the reminder of, have you considered your audience? Who are you writing to? What do they know? Is the information appropriate and necessary for them? Is the tone and voice appropriate and necessary for them? And then start writing a draft with the intention of sending it to the recipient or submitting it to your instructor. But having all that pre-writing allows you to get into drafting, where now you're shifting focus from nobody's going to see this, nobody's looking over my shoulder, to drafting, where now we're actually starting to think about it as, what if I were to send this to somebody right now? Okay, and then the last phase, and this is, I'm kind of work through these last little bit and for this video, is polishing. Polishing can be one of the most tedious parts because maybe we're not super confident as, with grammar or with vocabulary or something like that. But I guarantee you that in practicing polishing, that's where you're going to become more confident with those things. So in that final phase, what I would suggest is that you go through and look for any unnecessary words. Are there things that you can cut out, like adverbs, phrases like very, really, or nearly? Can sentences be shorter or more concise? It's not to say that you need to write like a children's book, but have you said things in the most economical way that you can? Is the message clear? Right. I'll give an example briefly here. I received an email from a colleague the other day that said, need to move the meeting to Monday. And I realized that the confusion was on the date. And when I clarified the date, it remedied the problem. The date was not clear, and that led to additional emails. Is the information in a logical order? Is the most important information clearly presented? Are there steps laid out? Are there any terms, phrases, acronyms, or jargon that may be unfamiliar to your reader, and therefore you need to expand or explain them? Another quick example here. I was talking to my dad the other day about some work that I'm doing here at Shoreline, and I referenced the VPI. And he said, well, what is that? I said, well, that's the vice president of instruction. That's not his fault. He does not work in academia. He did not work in academia. So he doesn't have that reference. So again, depending on who I'm talking to, I might want to explain. Are words spelled correctly, and is the punctuation and grammar correct? Now, I recommend that you work from 1 to 7. It's the way that I do it. It seems the most effective. And in 6 and 7, that's where I'm actually going to run a grammar spelling check. I do that at the end, first of all, so that I can make sure that I've caught things. But also, once I'm running that grammar spelling checker, I can see, hey, the grammar spelling checker actually doesn't understand what's going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore that suggestion. But I want to have the confidence that I've gone through and I've polished it first before going to that second set of eyes. All right, there you go. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, jokes, memes, or recipes, that's it. Lost my train of thought. Please let me know. Otherwise, I'll talk to you all later.